Hey guys, what's up? So today I'm going to be attempting to put together a small footprint, relatively affordable pedal board for high gain tones that I think is easily accessible. Anybody could get this stuff and put it together for well under $1,000, and it could fit in your backpack, and you could take it to a gig, or you could take it to, a show, whatever. So let's get to it. So what I have today is this small pedal board, 3 pedals, very just stripped down, bare bones, kind of high gain stuff that you would need to create metal tones. And then I have what I think is a pretty neat power amp that has a bit more to it than just your standard solid state power amp. And I'm going into this Mesa 412. Now, you're probably saying, well, this isn't very small footprint. But this power amp goes up to 100 watts. If you wanted to push it up into 100 watts, you'd probably need at least a 212. You could do like a 112 with a really, high headroom speaker. I actually do have one of those laying around here, but, for the purposes of today, these are loaded with those 2001 vintage 30s. These are the classic metal core tone speakers of the last 20 years. So I just wanted to get kind of a good baseline, and what I have is a Shure SM57 mic'd up on this thing. And we'll just go over what's all on this board and why I think if you are the type of person who doesn't want to lug around like a really heavy tube amp, or you're just looking for something that's a little bit more modular, portable, and you're still really hung up on, having analog gear, you don't want to go the full modeler route, you don't want to go do all the, programming, MIDI stuff. I get it. I've been there before, and I'm still kind of there too. So the first thing you're going to need is a preamp, something to create that distorted tone that you're looking for your high gain, metal stuff. And you could go as cheap as, like that Joyo Rigel preamp that I reviewed a couple months back. $60 gets you like a really nice tight high gain tone based off the KSR series, channel 3. And, that's perfectly acceptable. But today what I have, and I'll zoom in here, I have the revv G3. Now this is kind of that high gain that doesn't quite go over the top. It does have a aggressive red setting, and I have that engaged right now. But they also make the G4, and I think that the G3 is more suitable to my taste, a little more focused, a little bit more tight. And to the right there, I have the SD1 Super Overdrive, everybody's like go-to budget, boost overdrive pedal. You can use it as overdrive, but a lot of people like to run them in front of high gain amps to tighten up the tone. Asymmetrical clipping circuit. It's just a great pedal for, again, you're looking at $60 for this thing. You can't really do much better in that price point. And to the right, I also have a really generic noise gate just because it gets really loud in here. This is actually an affordable one too. This is from Joyo. I believe this is based off the TC Century. It's called the Legal Done. It has all the things you need, threshold, release, and then like a hold pattern. I have everything basically up to the max, except for the thresholds pulled back a little bit. So let me zoom back out here and talk a little bit about what you can do with these things. So in any situation, all you would really need is this preamp and this power amp to get most of what you're going for in terms of high gain tones. You might want the noise gate there just because of the noise, but beyond that, let's just pretend this doesn't exist and just look at what's actually driving sound. The boost is optional. So let me just turn on the rev and just hear what that sounds like, how I have it set up without any kind of overdrive. So yeah, and because I have the noise gate up front, just basically gating the signal from my guitar, you're going to get a high noise floor. This noise gate does allow you to do the 4-cable method, or you could just put this in the effects loop of this power amp, which this does have, and you could just have it gated off at the output source, and that noise floor would definitely go down. I like it here because it's a bit more fast, and that's what I need for this video. So before I get into the overdrive pedal and kind of how that affects the tone, I do really think it's important to kind of talk about what this power amp does and what it's capable of. So right now what I have it set up for is the 100 watt mode because I'm pushing this 412 cab. Now there's three voices. You have a US voice, a UK voice, and what is called a flat. Now the US voice is going to give you kind of like a Fendery, really high headroom, clean tone. Uh, Basically, it has a very dynamic preamp section built into this power amp. If you go to the UK setting, what you're going to get is more of a Voxy style, British kind of crunchy gain circuit. It doesn't clean up. It doesn't have a lot of headroom. It's meant to be kind of an overdriven circuit. And then the flat is what you would use in this situation that I'm doing, where I'm using a preamp, and that flat is basically keeping that EQ curve very in the middle. And as long as you have all of your bass, middle, and treble in the middle on this preamp section here, you're going to get a very flat EQ response. And beyond that, there's nothing else coloring the tone. Of course, you have gain and master. Gain is just how much signal you're letting into the circuit. Master is how much you're letting out. It's very linear. This is a Class D power amp. Now, one of the cool things that this does have that I'm actually utilizing because I think it sounds good, whether or not it's accurate, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and compare a 6L6 power amp section to what they have labeled as a 6LX6 response curve, but they do have individual response curves built into the output on this to where you can emulate what should be a 6L6, an EL34, a KT88, and then smaller tube styles like 6V6 and EL84 are there, or you can go fully linear and have none of that. I don't think it sounds as good without having some sort of response curve on. I think it actually sounds really good in the 6L6 position. So I have it there now. Maybe I'll switch over to like the EL34 or KT88 to see what that sounds like. But for now, it's 6L6. The other thing that's cool, like say you want to use this as your complete amp, which you should, you can have your clean tone as a preset. So if I hit this preset button, I'm now up on the US voice and I'm on a clean tone that I've already dialed in that has a preamp coloration to it that, you know, is a little bit more organic. And so here's what that sounds like. Now, if I turn that preset off and I go back to the linear, it's a bit louder, it's a bit more mid-forward, and it's a bit flatter sounding. There's not as much, you know, of that smile curve kind of mid-dip that you get with the US voiced circuit. So if it were me, I would use that as my clean tone, and I would probably put some, you know, either time-based or modular-based effects in the effects loop and use that as like my way to have clean tones. But since I'm only really caring about the high gain stuff today, because this is what I would take with me to like a band practice for like a hardcore band or some sort of like metalcore band, I'm gonna go back to the linear and we're gonna go back to the rev, and you hear that noise floor kick in. And here I am again on the rev with no overdrive. Now from this, you can, you know, get a little bit more treble. More mids. I'm not a big fan of the mids on this particular pedal. When you get them up past noon, they get like kind of a boxy sort of thing going on. That does get helped out a bit when you turn on the overdrive. But the other thing you can do, and I've done this, is you can use this, you know, this EQ that's on the linear setting here to kind of shape, almost like you have like a, you know, a post EQ in your effects loop. You can shape it a little bit, turn the mids down. The treble on here really puts in a little bit more air and presence. I find that the mid control on here really scoops out a lot of that kind of honky mid range, and if you were to turn it all the way down, you almost get like a real thrashy, like Pantera like tone. So I'm not really too big a fan of that. I want to keep the mids either at noon or a little bit scaled back, and then I'll keep the treble just bumped up a tad past noon. That way I have a little bit more freedom to kind of mess with the treble over here. One of the things that I still think you need to have an overdrive kind of in your circuit here, or some sort of boost pedal or something to shape the front end of your tone, is because the low end on this is okay, but it's a little bit like overbearing and a little bit like woofy, if you get what I mean. Now, scaling back the bass, it can thin it out a bit, but then you lose all the resonance. And if you turn the gain up, what you get is a bit more resonance, a little bit more bass. And on the red aggression setting on the rev, it's almost too much. If I were to go back to the turn off all the aggression, obviously the noise floor goes away, and just use the original rev circuit without any of the aggression mod. To me, that's a really good starting point, kind of clean, not clean, but it's got a bit more definition. It's not quite as saturated. It just has a bit more of that, defined sound to it. And if I engage the overdrive on top of that, it brings back a bit more of that saturation, and it also super tightens up the low end, almost to the point where it might be a little bit too much. I could even maybe bump that bass up a little bit, or maybe engage the blue aggression channel just so we get a little bit more of that back. So in doing that, I think the blue setting on the Rev G3, it's kind of a good middle ground of adding just a little bit more saturation, a little bit more grit to the signal without being a little bit too over the top. It adds a little bit more bass, not a whole lot. I do find the SD1 to be a pretty, low cutting kind of filter up in front of that. I do like messing with the treble on the Rev, not so much on the power amp. Whereas I think that the interplay between the mids on the pedal and the mids on the power amp are actually really well balanced. You can get like some really fine tuned on there. So if I move over to the KT88 setting, you'll see that it's a lot darker. In the 6L6, so if you like that low mid growl, the KT88 is going to be a bit more in your wheelhouse. I'm going to turn the treble up a little bit on the power amp. So it's cool. I still like the 6L6 better. The EL34 just kind of loses a little bit of its, a little bit of the meat. I could definitely see where that might be kind of desirable to be a little bit more mid-focused and still not have a whole lot of like woofy low end come through. I just think that the 6L6, for the purposes of, you know, modern stuff, it has a good balance of highs and lows and a little bit of a scoop in the mid. Again, whether or not it's accurate, don't know, don't care. I just think it sounds the best. And so let me go back. I'm gonna keep the bass a little bit below noon, mids up a little bit, treble up a little bit. I don't know. I'm gonna try to flatten out that curve on the power amp as much as possible. I kind of like that. I kind of like using the mid control on the pedal a little bit more to shape that mid range. On the blue, it's got enough saturation. I got the level up all the way, drive all the way down. My tone is actually more towards the middle. I might even put that even more towards the middle. It's pretty spiky. Now, this 100 watt Class C power amp is plenty loud. In fact, the master isn't even at like, you know, 9 o'clock, if that, on here. I have a lot more to go. I've taken this up louder. It gets as loud as any amp you could really think of in terms of just like, you know, getting as much efficiency out of these speakers. It does it really well. It would definitely hang with a drummer. I don't see how that would be a problem. So if you were to take this to like a live gig, you would either need something like, you know, this, if you're really into like, you know, if you're really masochistic and love hauling around giant ass speaker cabs, great. I still do. A 212 would be perfect. A 212 is great. I have one over here. I've used it and it gets really loud too. Not quite as loud as the 412, but it would probably do in a small venue. If you're going to mic up your stuff anyway, you could use a 212. You could even use a 112 like I was talking about on the 20 watt setting. In fact, if I just show you real quick what the 20 watt setting is. So here's 100 watt. 20 watts cuts it down by more than half. And then there is a 1 watt setting for like, you know, playing in your bedroom. If you can even hear that. Anyway, 100 watts. If you're going to be mic'd up anyway, a 212 and 112 will work. There's also a balanced XLR output on the side of this thing that allows you to go to the front of house with a cab emulation built in, and you can use the software that comes with this. Blackstar has their own software suite where you can go in and manipulate the types of cabs that you want to use. And, you know, that's really cool. I'm still really big on having speakers on stage. Personally, I like the feel of having a speaker. I haven't gone the whole route of, you know, hey, it's the front of the house that matters. I know that, but I love having a 412 or even a 212 on stage. So I'd probably go with something like this, 8 ohm out, just, you know, throwing it out there. And to be honest, like I can break this all down and I can put it in this backpack and it'll just completely hold all of this, ready to go, walk out the door. So, I think for about what is, this is the most expensive thing, obviously, looking at like a $500 item here. A really comprehensive power amp that does more than just power your speakers. Well worth it to me. This preamp, Sweetwater has them for about 160 right now. And, that's a little bit on the, mid range, but I think it's a really good sounding preamp. So we're looking at $60, not even $60. I think this was like $40. And you're looking at like, $700 and you have a really versatile, comprehensive thing going on here. Now you're probably going, well, I could just go buy any used, 6505 plus, and it would sound probably 100 times better than this. Maybe. I mean, and maybe that's what you like. I don't know if it sounds 100 times better. I don't know if my EVH Stealth over there sounds 100 times better than this. I can tell you they sound similar. At the same time, like, there's something to be said about small footprint, modular, analog, everything. And you can expand from this. This doesn't have to be your end all be all. Like I said, there's an effects loop in here that you can add, time delay, modular, or, modulation effects. You could add more pedals, you could set it up for things that aren't necessarily high gain, especially because you have that US voice kind of Fendery preamp in there and that UK kind of Voxy thing going on. And you can set it up to where you have, your preset as something different than what your main tone is. And so I think the Revv is a really good pedal. It's affordable. It's in that, that range of like being somewhat on the high end of like tone, made in Canada. And, everything else is just, a real easy to work with kind of component. So if you can't really tell, I've kind of been on like a kill switch engage kick lately. Been playing some of those riffs here and there. Again, this guitar is set up in drop C, so it's perfect for that metalcore. Didn't see my video on this Tripocalypse pickup thing, go check that out. This guitar has become like my number one. So anyway, I'm just gonna play around on this thing. And, hopefully you guys got something out of this. Hopefully you check out some of these things because they're cool. And these are all out-of-pocket purchases. I don't have anybody hitting my door down wanting me to talk about their products, quite yet. At least not everybody. So anyway, I'm going to keep playing on this because I kind of like this kind of piecemeal, plug and play kind of stuff. So anyway, later.